The term mystical experience is multifaceted and requires a stipulative definition. Philosophers often narrow it down to a cognitively significant yet non-sensory unitive experience, which reveal usually inaccessible aspects of reality. Examples include union with God, identification with Brahman, and unity with nature. However, classical mystics rarely describe their experiences as a literal merging of realities. Experiences that maintain an ontological distinction, such as contact with God or Jewish Kabbalistic encounters, fall outside the narrow definition. A more inclusive definition encompasses non-sensory or non-structured sensory awareness of inaccessible realities. In this video, we therefore use the term broadly to include experiences beyond unitive ones. During such experiences, the subject may lack immediate understanding of the disclosed realities, and realization may follow later. Mystics prioritize lasting consciousness and personal transformation, leading to an enlightened state devoid of a phenomenal self. And mysticism itself also involves practices and ways of life, not merely episodic experiences. Furthermore, mystical experience should not be confused with religious experience, as a secular form of mysticism is also possible. Mystical experiences can be classified through various dichotomies, and we shall explore the most common now. In the philosophy of mysticism, philosopher Walter Stace distinguished between extrovertive and introvertive experiences. Extrovertive experiences involve sense perception, such as perceiving unity in nature or cosmic consciousness, while introvertive experiences lack external sensory input, such as the experience of nothingness, or an awareness of God without sensory stimuli. Western philosophers often differentiate between dualistic and monistic experiences. Dualistic experiences maintain a separation between the subject and what is revealed, such as in the theistic distinction between God and the mystic. Monistic experiences, on the other hand, represent the ultimate form of unitive experiences as they dissolve all duality. They encompass either a realization of the absolute oneness of everything beyond our conceptual distinctions, or are an experience of pure consciousness. However, classical mystics rarely spoke of true union with God. The term unio mystica emerged later and gained prominence in modern mysticism studies. In Abrahamic traditions, union implies communion with God rather than identity. Mystical experiences involve transcending the self, but not necessarily merging with another reality. Christian mystics used metaphors like a drop of water in wine or iron in fire to describe union. They saw it as a spiritual marriage or a fusion of wills with God. Theistic mystics do sometimes claim complete absorption into God, or even identity with God. For instance, Meister Eckhart spoke of sharing the same being with God. These statements may be interpretations of union experiences or merely hyperbolic expressions. Furthermore, Adi Shankara's Advaita philosophy offers a non-theistic example of identity between our essence, Atman, and the ultimate reality, Brahman, in non-duality. Theurgic mysticism seeks to activate the divine through mystical practices, but most theistic mystics believe that such experiences are not caused by their own efforts. Theurgy is not commonly practiced by mystics, with Jewish Kabbalah being a notable exception. In Kabbalah, mystics aim to bring about inner changes within the Godhead. Apophatic mysticism emphasizes the ineffable nature of mystical experiences, while Kataphatic mysticism uses more positive descriptions. That is, Apophatic theology focuses on negation and what cannot be said about God, while Kataphatic theology employs positive terms. For instance, Adi Shankara's Advaita Vedanta, as well as Plotinus's Neoplatonism, embrace apophatic or negative perspectives. These approaches can represent different stages of contemplation, with apophatic considered higher. There are three purported features of mystical experiences which are of special interest to philosophers. For one, they are said to provide noetic knowledge, offering direct insight into ultimate reality. This knowledge is often described as being more real than reality itself. Secondly, classical mystics often use the term ineffability to express that their experiences surpass linguistic description, and William James viewed absolute ineffability as a defining characteristic of mysticism. However, the notion of ineffability presents a problem as to how one may talk of such experiences, as St. Augustine and others have noted. Various responses have been proposed, including silence, second-order attributions, and the infinite negation of what is said. On the other hand, many philosophers view ineffability as an honorific title for intense experiences, and that invoking ineffability prescribes the inapplicability of language to maintain a sense of mystery. And thirdly, scholars have noted the paradoxical nature of mystical experiences, which is to say that they involve logical contradictions. Paradoxicality often arises from the use of language originally meant for phenomenal realities. Mystics thus both affirm and deny aspects of their experiences, creating paradoxes that require a first-hand mystical experience to fully grasp. We now move on to consider the question of whether mystical experiences are given or constructed. To address this question, let us explore the idea of pure consciousness events, which involve emptying out all mental content while remaining awake. Pure consciousness events have been described by mystics like Paramartha and Meister Eckhart. However, many philosophers contend that all consciousness is necessarily intentional and contains dualistic content, though this may just mean that one's culture shapes the content that is attributed to the experience. The goal in many traditions is alignment with reality or contemplation of God. Emptiness serves as a prelude to contemplation, as seen in the works of Christian mystics like Jan Ruysbroek. Similarly, early Hasidism sought to shed corporeality for contemplation of the divine Sephirot, but Zen master Dogen cautioned against obliterating the perceived world in search of the nature of things. Essentialism is the idea that there is a common core in mystical experiences that transcends culture. This universal consciousness is precisely the pure consciousness event. Walter Stace's distinction is important in this regard. The extrovertive experience apprehends the unity within the multiplicity of the phenomenal world, evoking bliss and a sense of sacred objectivity. And the introvertive experience explores pure consciousness, devoid of empirical content. Stace considers the latter a ripening of mystical awareness, and theistic interpretations of the pure consciousness event are seen as conditioned by cultural influences. Constructivists argue that culture directly influences mystical experiences through beliefs, memories, and expectations. Non-constructivists, on the other hand, suggest that some mystical experiences are free from cultural influence. Soft constructivism allows for transcultural mystical experiences. It asserts that human nature limits us from experiencing pure awareness without any content or concepts, and even if it didn't, such experiences could not provide any knowledge. However, it is possible to access pre-conceptual levels of experience through training, and mystics can have knowledge of pure consciousness via recall immediately after the experience, even if the content is a non-dual consciousness. Hard constructivism, on the other hand, asserts that culture entirely determines cognitive content. It argues that the mystic's traditional conceptual framework determines the nature and content of the mystical experience, so that there can be no common experience across traditions. However, subjects may initially apply limited descriptions to experiences, reserving cultural elaboration for later reflection. Furthermore, there are noted examples of heretical mystics throughout history who contradicted their cultural backgrounds. Mystical disciplines can be generally seen to loosen the hold of cultural backgrounds, and mystical interpretations of sacred texts indicate that experiences shape understanding rather than the other way around. William James posed the question, do mystical states validate the truth of religious affections? Whether mystics can trust that their experiences are valid and meaningful can obviously not be independently justified, as this would entail epistemic circularity, so the more interesting consideration is whether non-mystics can consider the experiences of mystics valid and meaningful. In regard to this question, a great number of philosophers have defended the evidential value of religious and mystical experiences, particularly those involving experiences of God. They emphasize the perceptual nature of these experiences and argue that they provide evidence for their own validity. Agreement among individuals from different places and times, as well as the transformative effects of these experiences, further support their credibility. Of course, many experiencers of God rely on their mystical experiences within a broader doxastic practice rather than basing truth claims solely on these experiences. Classical mystics didn't view their experiences as proof of religious doctrines. Rather, they saw the fundamental scriptures as validating the existence of genuine mystical experiences. Psychological explanations, including pathological and non-pathological conditions, have been proposed for mystical experiences. Research on meditation and psychedelic drugs has shed light on brain activity during these experiences. However, neuroimaging studies reveal distinct patterns of brain activity in mystical experiences, mindfulness meditation, and concentration practices, and different mystical features have been associated with specific neural correlates. Science has failed to explain mystical experiences as mere natural phenomena, and pathological, brain-related explanations have tended to exaggerate their influence. For instance, temporal lobe epileptic seizures have been known to cause mystical experiences, but they are very rare, and they are not consistently ecstatic. Other patients experience distinctly non-mystical visions and voices instead. Historical studies also show no evidence of mental illness in past mystics, and modern research correlates mystical experiences with positive changes and healthy personality traits. Thus, pathological models misrepresent the nature of mystical experiences and cannot explain them. Granted, neuroscience can explain brain activity during mystical experiences, but this does not discredit their validity. Just as neurological explanations of perception don't undermine sense experience, all experiences have neural manifestations. Nevertheless, some argue that since naturalism assumes all explanations to be natural, supernatural explanations for mystical experiences should be rejected automatically. Invoking God for such experiences is like using miracles to explain natural phenomena. However, this line of attack is clearly ineffective against anyone who defends the compatibility of spirituality and science. Naturally, scientific interest in meditation and the use of psychedelics has given rise to secular mysticism. This approach focuses on the psychophysiological effects of meditation and psychedelics, disconnecting itself from traditional mystical traditions. Secular mysticism emphasizes naturalist spirituality and the sense of connection to others and the world. Mystical experiences evoke awe and wonder, but may not be seen as providing cognitive knowledge or transcendent realities. Secular mysticism therefore raises further questions about the epistemological implications of mystical experiences, the role of cultural interpretation, and the possibility of a meaningful life without reference to transcendent realities. But of course, secular mysticism overlooks the profound depth and transformative power that traditional mystical practices attribute to transcendent realities. By disconnecting from these age-old spiritual traditions, there is a risk of diluting the profound wisdom and insights they offer, potentially reducing mystical experiences to mere naturalistic phenomena. And with that, we have reached the end of this video. If you're interested in scholastically respectful explications of profound texts and traditions from history, please do subscribe to the channel with notifications on. My goal is to build a visual encyclopedia of knowledge surrounding philosophy, psychology, and esotericism, and without the dogmatic clickbait that more easily finds success on YouTube, your help is incredibly valuable. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you have a good day.